Welcome, John, to Metallarian Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about pattern-seeking animals, the last album, Only Passion Truth, and other things relating to the music world. So, first of all, how are you during this pandemic, during this situation, this ridiculous war, and how was the band during these chaotic times?
Well, it's been interesting the past couple of years, to say the least, for everybody. I think where I am right now, I'm in California, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And I think we're pretty much through the pandemic at this point. Who knows if it'll come back, but if it does, we'll deal with it. Everything's good. And as far as the war, that's crazy for the past few weeks.
Yeah.
So, there's always something. I'm expecting aliens to land next. There's got to be something insane,
right.
crazy coming down the pike. But yeah, we did okay during the pandemic. We had some issues as far as getting together to be able to record the last album, just because of travel restrictions, and we didn't want to be in the same room. Because there's one of the studios we worked at, there was an outbreak of COVID, so we had to push certain things back. But for the most part, we all worked from our own studios and did things, virtually and online. So, which isn't a whole lot of different than the way we've done in the past. So it worked out well. It just took a bit longer than we had planned on to put this album out. The other thing was that we found out we were trying to release this album in fall of last year, in 2021. But we found out that there's a huge lead time on getting vinyl pressed. It's like a 6-month wait. And so that pushed us back a while too, because there's so much demand for, vinyl pressing, and there's only a limited amount of manufacturers set up to do it. And some were closed down during the pandemic. So aside from the practical issues of getting things done, it's been kind of status quo, in making this record.
Okay. So what is the key to find inspiration even during these complicated times for everyone? How do you work in order to create new compositions and release albums constantly?
Luckily, I don't really need inspiration to write. I know a lot of people, like Ted Leonard, who's in the band, when he writes, he has to be inspired by something in his life, something bad, or a divorce or a breakup or something bad happening, and he writes great songs around it. He's been happy the past few years, so he hasn't been writing, but he needs inspiration like a lot of people. To me, I've always looked at writing as writing like a short story or as a novelist. And maybe it's from working in film and TV years and years and years ago, where you had to write something. They say, well, you got to come up with 10 minutes of music for this scene by Friday or whatever. And you couldn't say, oh, I'm not inspired, I don't feel the muse. That didn't fly. So I just learned to write. And luckily, I don't have writer's block, because I know a lot of people do get that occasionally. But if I need to write something, I'll just sit down and start doing it. And as the mechanics of the song come together, that can inspire me from that. But I don't need the inspiration to sit down and just start doing something.
Okay. You're releasing the new album called Only Passion Truth. So how are you feeling about it? It has surprised me that it's going to be your second album releasing during this pandemic time. So was this the old plan before the situation, perhaps? Or are all these songs totally new, or maybe songs were that not included in the previous album?
Well, there's, the last Prehensile Tales, the last album, was released in May of 2020, right after the pandemic started, but it was done and in the pipeline before the pandemic started.
Okay.
What the pandemic did for that one was we had live stuff canceled, but like everyone did, there was just everything shut down. This album, I'm happy, and everyone's really happy with how it turned out. I wanted to make this album a little more up-tempo, more excitement, just nothing, no low spaces as far as big, slower sections, which I can tend to sink into because I like that kind of stuff so much, but I wanted everything just to move right along. The material, for the most part, was written for this album. There's a couple songs, actually Ted wrote one called Much Ado, which has been around for a few years, and I've been trying to get him to record it so we could record it, and he finally said, okay, let's do it, so we did that. And there's a couple one song, Rock, Paper, Scissors, which I had co-wrote with a friend of mine a long time ago, but it was rewritten for this album. But aside from that, one of the bonus tracks is one of Ted's as well, but everything was pretty much written for this album. The title track, Only Passing Through, was a song I started for the first album, but it wasn't working out. It was kind of similar to something else there, so I put it aside and brought it back and wrote it for this album. But essentially, everything was written and recorded for this album. No tracks left over from earlier sessions. It was all recorded fresh.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in terms of lyrics, I see that the name of the band is Patterns Seeking Animals, and I see in the cover art an animal into there. So how do you relate the music with the concept of I think Patterns Seeking Animals with the whole concept of an album, especially lyrical?
Yeah, it's funny. Pattern Seeking Animals, I don't really relate it to the lyrics so much. I just like the phrase because it's a phrase about how humans evolved from looking for patterns in things.
Yeah.
It's like, when you're a caveman and you walk out to the beach and every day at this time, the tide goes out and you can get fish. That's a pattern. So we look for those things. And then we find things which don't mean anything, like we see a face in the clouds. Oh, that looks like a face up in the clouds, even though it's not really there. So to evolve, you need that type of thing. I like the idea of putting some kind of animal for the artwork, and the artwork from this one was inspired by a story I read about a village in Finland where they were having a problem with moose and elk essentially, I guess would be there, and reindeer being run over at night by cars on the dark highways. So they gathered them all up and painted their antlers with their fluorescent paint so they would reflect with car headlights so the cars would see them and not run into them. So I thought that was a really cool image. So I worked with Thomas Everhart, the graphic designer for that, which I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
Okay. Nice.
And also for the album cover also, it goes along with Only Passing Through because the moose and the other animals in the artwork are passing through this old western town.
Okay. Okay, when I see your cover art, the three cover art since the Patterns Seeking Animals self-titled album, then Presents and Tales, and this new album, I love your three covers. So how are you based when you do a new cover art? Do you do the cover art sketches perhaps, or perhaps do you let the way to the artist to do his jobs? Because when I see the second, especially the Prehensile Tales, I see like perhaps do you know this game? A game like I don't remember the name of the game, but it's very similar, very like the Titans, like this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, as far as the album covers or the
yes, about the covers, how?
Oh, the album.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the first one was developed for the animals seeing the stars, that look like in the constellation, like the elephant would see the constellation looks like an elephant, the giraffe would see one that looks like a giraffe. For the second album, the cover on that one, we did that album so quickly, I didn't really have time to start working with a graphic designer, so I found a pre-existing piece of artwork with this artist from Poland, Mirakus, did, which I really love the cover of that, which worked out really well for the graphics. And again, it's an animal, a big ape walking with the cities on its back. I just thought it was a really cool piece of artwork. I tend to be more involved in that kind of thing because I have a graphic arts and photography background. I did it for a long time. So I tend to be real particular about art and how it comes across.
Yeah, okay. So when we hear the word progressives, sometimes we assume every song has to be a demonstration of skills with every instrument around the world. But I like it when there is a balance between the great instrumental parts, but at the same time the song is accessible for everyone. So this is something I like about Patterns Seeking Animals. So how important is this aspect for you? How do you work in order to get this balance and about these skills and the maintenance subject?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've loved progressive rock from when I was a kid. Whatever you want to call it, whether it's art rock back when I was a kid, I guess we called it that. And then but I also really love pop music and rock music where there's accessible songs. So to me, I guess there's a lot of people who can just go out and write great instrumental stuff and, you know, killer solos and everything like that. But I'm more interested in making accessible songs where there's parts in the songs where they're accessible, like really great pop or rock songs, but also some really cool music stuff to go along with it, you know, more orchestrated. I tend to try and stay away from long sections where it's just instrumental, you know, parts for the sake of it, you know, to show off chops and stuff like that. It has to all be integral to the song. But being accessible is the number one thing for me, because to me, I just am not interested in hearing and working on a song where you don't have a great singable melody or a hook or a chorus or something like that. Then you can kind of go crazy with the music around it, expanding it, you know, make it a little more complex. I guess what makes it progressive, and that's a term which people use for different things, is a sense that they're not typical song structures. And then I go into, you know, we go into different time signatures and everything. But again, it all has to make sense within the song. It's not just there for the sake of having an odd time signature or, you know, ripping solo or whatever like that. It has to make sense to me.
Okay. Also, you have many long songs, so especially in modern times when people want everyone fast and short. So don't you think don't you think this can be risky? Because in addition, do you plan to make long songs? It is something that comes naturally during the process of composition.
Well, it comes naturally, but every song is different. I never start out to make a long song. I don't sit there and say, okay, I'm going to write an 18-minute song now. That never occurs to me. I'll just start working on something, and then, like for example, there's a song on the new album called Everdark Mountain, which I wrote, and I started writing it, and it ended up being about a little less than 3 minutes long. And at one point I thought, well, I should stretch it out and do some other things, but I would keep working on it. And it all came back to that song just needs to be 2 minutes and 45 seconds long because it says everything it needs to say within the song. But then there are other material, like Time Has a Way, which is 13 and a half, whatever minutes. I didn't start it to make it that long, but as I was writing it, I kept thinking of other things to put onto the song and going into different sections. To me, it's just, I just get to the point when writing any song where I think, okay, I've got the substructures together, it's long enough. And a lot of times what I'll do is edit parts out. If there's a minute or two which I'm thinking is just getting a little boring or not quite as exciting, I'll just cut it out. So the songs just end up being as long as they end up being. I'm not trying, if you're a pop band, these days, you pretty much have to make all your songs around 3.5 minutes maximum. There's a lot on the pop charts these days, a lot of songs which are 2.5 minutes long for radio play, but that doesn't really apply anywhere. So, it just gets to the point where it's long enough to put the song across. But I like things to be concise, and you can be concise in 2.5 minutes or 13 minutes. It just depends how you write it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Talking about modern times, we can say that nowadays it is more accessible for a band to release a record even by doing everything at home. So, and I have seen bands working in independent ways with no label in the middle.
Sure.
So you have
for the
been,
love of it. Sure,
yes. So you have been working with Inside Out Music since your first records. So how important is it for the band to work with such an important label into the progressive metal rock scene?
Well, it's important to have the backing of a label financially. First of all, that helps because they give you an advance and you're able to go into the studio and record. And it also helps with me anyway to know that something we're doing is going to be released to the public. I give all credit for people who, bands who do it on their own and everything like that. I don't know if I could do that at this point in my life. It's just I'm getting older, and I've done it in the past, and having a label really frees you up to be creative and get things done. It's nothing like if you were a big rock or pop band in the 80s and you had, you're making millions of dollars. It's nothing like that. But with this label and this project, the basic costs are paid for in recording and everything. So that's a big help. So you're not having to come up with money for studio time and things like that, which can be a drag if you're doing other things in life and you don't have the money. It can be kind of daunting. It does help to be able to do it at home too, because a lot of the stuff we still do is at home and then do it virtually because the members of the band are spread out all over the country. Ted's in New York, Dave's in Northern California, and Jimmy and I are in Southern California. So we recorded the drums at the studio here at Rich Mauser's place. But Dave and Ted's parts we all did remotely, especially during the pandemic, which we would have had to have done anyway.
Okay. So by the way, as experienced musicians as you are, so how has been your experience with the ways of promoting music nowadays? Music with the digital platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Tidal, etc., etc.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about Spotify and Apple Music. On one hand, as an artist, because I see the statements every quarter, they don't pay a lot. They pay very low money to writers and publishers for the music they put on there. But on the other hand, it's necessary these days. There's no way to get around it. And I also like the idea of the music being on Spotify and Apple Music because people can discover it who wouldn't normally have had to do it. I know when I was a kid, for the most part, especially progressive rock, which you didn't hear on the radio, you always had to take a chance. You go into a store and you'd see an album by someone like, PFM or Gentle Giant or something like that. And you would think, yeah, my friend said these are really good, but boy, that's a lot of money to buy it and try it if I don't like it. And now you can go on and Spotify, listen to it in 10 seconds and go, oh, that's really cool. I like it. I'm going to go ahead and buy it. Same thing with YouTube. That's how I discovered new music a lot of times through YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music and everything. So I'm totally fine with all of those markets. I know there's some bands who don't put their stuff on Spotify, which I can understand in one sense, but on the other hand, I think they miss out on expanding their fan base. Again, for the same thing, there's so much music out there, especially, just take prog. Forget about everything else. Prog music, you don't go a week by without seeing 5 or 10 releases from various people, whether they're on a label or putting out their own thing. It's daunting. I don't know how people have time to listen to it. And without Spotify or being able to think, oh, that's a cool thing, I'll go on YouTube and see if there's anything there. And you can listen to it that way. And I never would have heard it otherwise, and I definitely wouldn't have bought it. So, I think it's a necessity. So I guess people have their own reasons of not putting their stuff on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or whatever, but I think it's a necessity as far as I'm concerned these days. Mm-hmm. Although I do wish they would pay more. So, but that's a whole other argument, right?
Okay. Yeah. You said one thing. If you use these digital platforms, do you prefer to listen classic band that inspire you to make music, or do you have time to listen or discover new bands, as you said? How do you see the progressive rock scene nowadays? Because, as you said, for me, it's very saturated because it's very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
It's very difficult to get 1, 2 bands, 3 bands. Now, then listen whole albums for 5 bands in a day. Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing is that I do listen to some classic stuff from my childhood, or Yes or Genesis when we're talking prog or whatever. Okay. But I that's kind of rare these days. I listen to just a lot of music. I don't watch a whole lot of TV. I work from home, so I'm always listening to music or driving around. I listen to new stuff, and it's not only prog. I listen to everything from, current pop to K-pop to rock to whatever is out there. If it's a good song with great production and cool song structures, I'm into it. I'm really into that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. With the prog stuff, I think one of the issues, besides the fact that there's so many artists out there competing for your attention, is for some reason prog bands just think that they have to put out a double album or 70 minutes worth of music on one album, and it's just daunting. I don't know how people have time to listen to that much music. I don't understand it. I guess maybe from growing up when you listen to those old bands, the records were no longer than 40, 42 minutes long. So, you see some of these bands, they put out a double album and they filled up both sides of a CD, and that's like 2 hours, a couple hours of music, and I just don't have time. I listen to records and even bands I love and records I love, after about 45, 50 minutes, I just start losing patience and losing interest because there's always something new to listen to.
Okay, okay. So relating to this matter, and we're very close to this interview. So now the digital panels bring us a lot of music to the world. But now with this with these new ways of hearing music, the new generation, especially talking about 15 or 20 years old people, they love to do their playlist with one, two, three, or maximum 14 an album. So what for you? Why the albums doesn't have the same impact compared to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think for people my age, or older people in general, you tend to gravitate toward the music that affected you most as a teenager, because there's so much emotional tied into it. I just read something interesting that said for music to really sink into you when it first makes the biggest impact, you're on 13 or 14 years old, and for those few years, those are really the artists that really stick with you, through your life, because there's so much tied up with it, so many emotions, experiences, whatever. And you can still still get into stuff later than that, but a lot of people just stop listening to new music. To me, if I listen to, again, I keep going back to Genesis, my favorite album of theirs is Selling England by the Pound, which I think is brilliant, but I also know and admit that part of that is what's linked, stuck in my head about it from when I was a teenager listening to that music, because there's so much involved in, the experiences and the music which first impacted you. I would completely understand someone who's 15 or 20 years old hearing that album and thinking, what the hell is this? This is, I don't like this at all, because it's a different generational thing and different type of music they grow up with. A lot of people do like it. They like the old stuff like, Pink Floyd and Genesis, but I've met people who are into modern prog who listen to the old stuff and just it doesn't connect with them, which I completely understand and I actually really like, because the last thing you want are for younger people, to stop coming up with new material and their own artists and everything. If everyone gets stuck on, Bad Company and the Police and whatever those groups, no one's gonna actually progress. Everyone's going to be listening to the old stuff, and no one will put out new stuff. There's so much great new stuff out there anyway. So.
Yeah. So, what are the future plans that Black Panther Secret Animal has for this new album? Perhaps a North American tour completely, a European tour, or perhaps more videos coming in the next weeks, in the few next days, or perhaps in a Latin American tour. Who knows? Perhaps in a chance for the future.
I would love to get to South America. However, there's financial realities to travel to bringing a group like that. It's hard enough playing in America because the distances are so far between. I would love to take any advantage with the band. We've talked about it at doing tours with other artists in different places. Right now, we're booked for Rozfest, the Prague Festival in April in Sarasota, Florida. We're booked on that, and then we're booked on the Cruise to the Edge, which we'll be doing, in May, which will be fun. And after that, we may do some other gigs, but nothing set out. Like I said, due to the pandemic, like everyone else, we had things booked, and those all just went away because everything was canceled. So we're kind of getting a late start. So it's interesting because most people will be seeing us as a new band. It's the first time we've been played, but with 3 albums out already, so which is kind of crazy. Okay. But no, I'd love to get to South America, Europe. I'm open to all that stuff, but there are financial and travel realities which can get pretty tricky.
Yeah. Well, John, the sad times arrived at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one as I did. And thank you very much for your time. Your last album is a great one, and congratulations for that. Perhaps do you want to add something to your Latin American fans and Metalerum readers?
Sure. I'm happy for anyone who listens to and especially likes the album, and we'll have more coming out because we're already working on number 4, the 4th album. So, like I said, we turned the last album in
by the end of the world. By the end of the world.
By the end of the world. Hopefully we'll get it done before World War III starts. I know, believe me, I know. I'm thinking about that all the time. So we just keep working, and hopefully we won't be nuked in the experience and get it out there. But we're still working, and the idea, greetings to everyone in South America.